Goblins, you gotta watch your backs when you're out there. If you get caught by those damned elves, you'll end up as breeding machines. Not only will you have to marry a dozen elves, even your monthly sleep time will be a measly 8 hours. When Ye Yan opened his eyes, he saw a dim cave where goblins were scattering in all directions, and chasing after them were elves of indescribable beauty. The elves laughed wildly. You shameless elves, we goblins would rather die than submit to your humiliation. Ye Yan shook his head. When he saw his green skin all over, he realized he had transmigrated into a goblin. But what confused him was, why were the goblins running away? These were all elves. Just then, an old goblin scowled and ran in the opposite direction. Elves, come at me! I'll take whatever you've got! At that moment, a sense of familiarity washed over Ye Yan. That's more like it. This is how a goblin should act. But the next second, the old goblin shouted defiantly, Torture me all you want. Spare the kids! They're still young! Several delicate elves charged forward one after another and pounced on the old goblin, swallowing him up in the blink of an eye. You're quite the tough old guy, huh? Do whatever you want to me. They're just children. Upon hearing this, the elf licked her lips with interest and let out a silvery laugh. Don't worry, they won't be kids for long. Watching this scene unfold, Ye Yan was dumbfounded. Why the hell is that? Come at me if you've got the guts! He was about to step forward to stop the brutal elves, but was suddenly grabbed by a goblin named Shahai. Hurry up, don't let the elder's sacrifice be in vain! Shahai's eyes were filled with tears. As he stared grief-stricken at the old goblin, who was foaming at the mouth, Ye Yan was too stunned to react, and was dragged toward the cave entrance. But he just couldn't understand. Wasn't this supposed to be a good thing? These were all beautiful girls he could never have met in his past life. He looked back with regret, wanting to take one last look. A memento, but what he saw when he turned around was beneath those angelic faces an overwhelming and terrifying power, basic magic, ice shards. The elves merely chanted the incantation softly, and the freezing power burst forth from their staves, rushing toward the goblins. Every goblin in its path was turned into an ice sculpture, and the so-called goblin elder had already died in despair. The elder's eyes were wide open, as if he was still worrying about them. These young goblins, none of you are getting away. The elves cupped their flushed cheeks, their expressions twisted with madness. Only then did Ye Yan realize these weren't elves at all. They were all demons. But the frost had already frozen his ankles and quickly spread all over his body. Before his consciousness faded away, an extremely beautiful silver-haired elf was walking slowly toward him. This goblin is quite a looker. Wonder how long he'll last. When he opened his eyes again, Ye Yan found himself locked in a cage. As his vision cleared up, he saw a huge bedroom come into view. The room was decorated with flowers and plants, like a paradise on earth. But what was out of place with the surroundings was goblins staring blankly into space, repeating the same phrase over and over, muttering nonstop. 10 days, 8 hours. Ye Yan turned his head in confusion and checked his body again. Luckily, nothing seemed amiss. Bro, where are we? He hoped to get some useful information. From the other goblins, that goblin was clearly broken, still muttering 10 days, 8 hours over and over. Shahai, the goblin standing beside him, gave Ye Yan a surprised glance, then remembered Ye Yan's brave act earlier, and explained patiently. This is the elf village. I think we're in some elf's bedroom right now, but why did those elves capture us? As soon as he asked this question, almost every conscious goblin stared at Ye Yan in disbelief, but Ye Yan didn't care about that. He just looked at Shahai in confusion. What are they going to do with us? Shahai's face instantly darkened, despair deepening in his eyes. What else? Those elves kidnapped us strong goblins. What else could they want? At this point, Shahai let out a bitter laugh, as if he had already accepted the inevitable fate. Ye Yan was even more confused. He was about to ask another question when suddenly the sound of a door opening echoed. In walked an elf with flushed cheeks, still gasping slightly for breath. The elf who had just entered quickly locked her eyes on Ye Yan. Ye Yan felt a surge of panic and instinctively covered his chest. But the elf reached out and grabbed him, lifting him up as easily as if he were a chick. Little goblin, you're up today. Her jade-like wrist seemed to hold immense strength, leaving Ye Yan completely unable to move. The elf tossed him aside casually, sending him crashing onto the mattress. What do you think you're doing? Ye Yan's face burned with shame and anger. In both his lives combined, he had never met someone so forward. Upon hearing this, the elf licked her lips, her eyes filled with a desire Ye Yan couldn't understand. Then the nightmare began. At the same time, Ye Yan finally understood what 10 days, 8 hours meant. Exactly what those words stood for. A month later, Ye Yan sat in the cage, hugging his knees, tears streaming down his green face. He was filled with nothing but regret now. Those damned elves didn't even treat him like a human being. 10 days, 8 hours. It turned out it meant only 8 hours of sleep every 10 days. Not even an ox should be worked this hard. Besides, for some reason, his stamina was better than that of an average goblin, and he was quite handsome too. But apparently that wasn't a good thing at all. During this past month, he would never forget the way the elves' eyes lit up with greed, starting with just one elf, and then growing to several more. Throughout the entire month, he had only gotten 30 hours of sleep in total. Nowadays, just the thought of an elf's face made Ye Yan want to throw up. And just then, a group of elves pushed open the door once again. The bedroom was filled with the girls' laughter. Little Goblin, "Come play with us!" "Can you please let me go?" Ye Yan looked up at the 10 elves in front of him with a wronged expression. Begging pitifully, the elves let out a cold laugh, paying no heed to his pleas, watching the elves crawling all over him. Ye Yan's tears flowed uncontrollably. He had imagined 1,000 ways to die, but never like this. Is there a system or something? Can I restart this game? Just as Ye Yan thought, his life was about to come to an end. A green light emerged from the elf's palm, and then a warm current slowly spread throughout Ye Yan's body. The elves cast healing magic on him one after another, making it impossible for him to die even if he wanted to. 2 more months passed just like that, watching over a dozen elves push open the door once again. Ye Yan fell into utter despair. He lay down on the mattress without any resistance, and the elves paid him no mind either, chatting and laughing among themselves. Heard the girls from the cliff cave say they caught a bunch more goblins. Really, that's fantastic news. They called us over to help this time. To round up all those goblins? That's perfect. The goblins in the village are almost worn out anyway. After over 10 hours of torment, the brief ordeal finally came to an end. The only silver lining was Ye Yan found out they were going out later, which meant the defenses of the elf village would be much weaker. After all the elves had left, all the goblins in the cage looked on, at Ye Yan with admiration, because with him around, they'd suffered way less torment. So the goblins here all started looking up to Ye Yan as their leader. "Brother Yan, you all right?" Shahai stared at Ye Yan, filled with worry, but Ye Yan didn't even have the strength to reply by then. Just then, though, the door creaked open again. "What are you moping around for?" "I haven't left yet." The elf who showed up this time was a total stranger, but Ye Yan couldn't even summon the strength to open his eyes. He just cursed those demons under his breath. Yet he couldn't stop his body's involuntary reactions, and thanks to the goblin's innate traits, even though he was dead tired right now, he could still pull it off. Yi Yan, immersed in the darkness, could clearly sense that his life was nearing its end. Just as he was drowning in despair, inside his mind, a mechanical voice suddenly rang out. "Congratulations. In a short period of time, you've passed the soul test of 10 million achievements. You qualify. The power of lust shall be bestowed upon you." In an instant, Ye Yan could feel his body slowly recovering. He had no clue what the power of lust even was, but this power kept strengthening his body bit by bit. So Ye Yan opened his eyes, and the elf beside him was fast asleep. It seemed like she thought Ye Yan was too weak to do anything. That's why she didn't lock him back in the cage. But he'd never forget everything he'd been through these days. He glanced around the room and pulled a sharp dagger out from under the bed. Over the past 3 months, he'd already memorized every inch of this room. Besides, the elves had never paid any attention to them. They'd just left weapons lying around everywhere. Ye Yan raised the dagger and aimed it at the sleeping elf. The nightmares of these past 3 months made him thrust it down without a second thought. The elf seemed to sense something was wrong. Right as the dagger was about to pierce her forehead, she grabbed it abruptly with her hand. "Damn it! What do you think you're doing to my beautiful face?" Ye Yan let out a cold laugh. Without hesitation, he smashed his head hard against the elf's. A loud thud, red liquid splattered all over the mattress. The elf was instantly dazed from the blow. Ye Yan wasn't about to let this chance slip away. He yanked the dagger free in a flash and stabbed it straight into the elf's heart. Once, twice, 3 times! The elf's screams echoed in Yeon's ears. He didn't stop until he'd stabbed her heart over a dozen times. Then he went for her head. In this strange fantasy world, he wasn't about to give the elf any chance to fight back. He kept stabbing for dozens of seconds, until the stunning girl was reduced to a bloody pulp. Only then did that strange voice ring out in his head again. Piercing power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual piercing power increased by $1,000. Yi Yan was certain that his successful counterattack had everything to do with that voice. But this place wasn't safe to stay in any longer. His gaze drifted away from the elf's corpse and landed on the goblins locked in the cage nearby. At that moment, the goblins all stared at Ye Yan in utter shock. They never thought their worn-out leader could actually take down that terrifying elf. Under everyone's gaze, Ye Yan found the cage key, then slowly stepped in front of the goblins. Brothers, do you really want to be toyed with by those ugly elves forever? Is this what goblins are destined for? Upon hearing Ye Yan's words, the goblins all hung their heads in shame. Shahai clenched his fists tightly, thinking of the humiliation of these past months. He suddenly lifted his head and shouted at the top of his lungs, "No, we don't!" Seemingly inspired by his cry, the other goblins all raised their hands and echoed, "No, we don't!" Ye Yan looked at Shahai, his eyes brimming with approval. Now it's time to show the true grit of goblins. Let's charge out of here together! Goblins will never be slaves. That rousing speech sparked their will to survive. Inside the room, the goblins' roars erupted one after another. Goblins will never be slaves. Now we split up, free our brothers, then break out of the elf village. Right after that, Ye Yan used the power he'd just gained to heal the other goblins' wounds and restore their strength, feeling their energy surging back. The way the goblins looked at Ye Yan grew even more reverent. They all grabbed whatever weapons felt right in the room, then charged out in a swarm. Goblins will never be slaves. As the door swung open, shouts from elves and goblins alike kept pouring in from outside, but Ye Yan didn't move an inch. He just nodded in satisfaction. He knew he couldn't escape this place all by himself. Even though he had the power to heal his body, his energy was ultimately limited. He'd just healed the goblins' wounds and already burned through 1/10 of his energy. That was 100 points of lust power right there. He had to make the most of the goblins holding off the 2 elf guards. Then he freed the goblins locked in the next room. Damn it, what's gotten into these goblins? Why the hell do they have to riot when the boss lady's out hunting? Kamina, these goblins, they're not right. They shouldn't have the strength to move at all. The riot just wouldn't die down. It was driving Kamina up the wall. She'd planned to take them alive, but now she didn't hesitate to unleash her ice shard magic. They're just a bunch of lowly slaves. How dare they rebel against their perfect mistress? Swoosh! A magic ice shard stabbed toward his back. Ye Yan spat out a mouthful of blood. The dagger he'd raised froze midair. Huh, you thought you could sneak up on me? Ye Yan gritted his teeth through the pain and drove the blade deep into Kamina's neck. The searing pain made the elf scream bloody murder instantly. What? How are you still alive? Kamina was sure. That ice shard had definitely pierced the goblin's heart. He shouldn't have any strength left. Ye Yan grinned, his mouth stained red with blood. Why would I die before I finish off demons like you? I wouldn't dream of it. He stepped forward and pinned Kamina down tight, stopping her from casting any more magic. He drove the dagger straight into Kamina's heart with his full weight. Kamina glared at Ye Yan behind her, eyes blazing with fury. She seemed determined to etch his face. Deep into her memory, I'll remember you. You were actually quite delicious. You're asking for it! Ye Yan's face darkened. He pulled the dagger out and stabbed her several more times. Your piercing power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual piercing power increased by 10,000, 10x multiplier. Ye Yan was completely stunned. He never expected this elf to give him so much energy. Even on her deathbed, she was still thinking about that lewd stuff. Requirements met. Activate power, equivalent exchange. Pay 5,000 piercing power to exchange for combat piercing power. Without a moment's hesitation, Yugen nodded in agreement. He let out a grunt and let go of Kamina's still warm body. Through gritted teeth, he pulled the ice shard out of his heart. The tearing pain made him scream involuntarily. This kind of pain is really unbearable. If this had happened right after I transmigrated, I would have definitely passed out from the agony, but now his body was covered in wounds, big and small, each one a souvenir left by the elves. He stared down at the elf's still beautiful corpse on the ground, his eyes filled with nothing but disgust. He thought to himself that for the rest of his life, he would never feel anything but hatred for the elf race. Just then, a swarm of goblins poured out of the wooden hut. The second they laid eyes on Ye Yan, they all cheered excitedly, "Chieftain!" They were about to bolt when a red-haired elf stepped out to block their way. The moment he saw the elf, Ye Yan didn't hesitate. He roared furiously, "Kill him! Grab your weapons!" The goblins froze for a second. They hadn't expected their newly anointed chieftain to be this fierce. The elf let out a cold snort, not sparing them a single glance. "You filthy goblins!" The next second, the elf let out a shrill scream, her beautiful face contorted in rage. "Die!" Before the elf could even react, Ye Yan's blade sliced toward her neck. But his technique wasn't quite up to par. He failed to deliver the killing blow instantly. The elf gritted her teeth through the pain and pressed a hand against the wound. A magic circle slowly materialized in her other hand. Basic magic. "Ice my ass!" Ye Yan headbutted her hard, knocking her dazed and confused. Taking advantage of her stupor, Ye Yan pulled out his dagger, aiming to stab her straight in the head. A transparent ice shield popped up right in front of the elf's head. "What?" Ye Yan exclaimed in shock. When the hell did she cast that spell? "Huh." The elf turned around and grinned, her face twisted into a ferocious snarl. "Lowly goblin! Cut the crap! Die!" Ye Yan roared in a fit of rage. No more words wasted. He raised his dagger on the spot and stabbed hard, only to be blocked. "It's useless. 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 Ha ha ha." The elf laughed maniacally. Magic power slowly surged from her body and flooded into the ice shield. "You measly low-rank goblins could never hope to break my ice shield." As the elf began chanting under her breath, the air around them started to churn. Ye Yan's heart skipped a beat in panic. He clenched his dagger tight and roared furiously, "Die!" In the next instant, a faint blue sword aura flickered to life around Ye Yan's dagger. He could feel a strange power coursing through it, and he stabbed forward with all his might, guided by that power. The dagger sliced through the air, leaving a trail of swordlight in its wake. Boom! The ice shield shattered instantly. Shards of ice scattered everywhere and landed on the elf's face, frozen in disbelief. What's this? How is this possible?" In the elf's horrified gaze, the dagger pierced straight through her head. Splurt! Fresh! Blood splattered everywhere. Then, in his mind, the mechanical voice rang out again. "Lust power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual lust power, plus 3,000. Your combat feat. Thrust proficiency +1. Combat feat." That power and skill he'd unleashed on instinct was what they called a combat feat. He'd felt it just now, that power. Lodged within the dagger, it had boosted the dagger's piercing power. Otherwise, with his own strength alone, he never would have broken that ice shield. Just as Ye Yan lost himself in thought, a voice snapped him back to reality. "Chieftain, you're absolutely amazing." Shahai stared at Ye Yan with pure admiration. "You actually took down that terrifying elf. We can't stay here any longer. Now's not the time to get distracted. We have to leave fast." But before he could finish standing up and speaking his mind, an ice shard pierced straight through his body. Ye Yan looked down at himself, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, then crumpled to the ground, motionless. "Chieftain!" The goblins cried out in agony as they saw him fall, sobbing uncontrollably. "You damned elf." Shahai spun around, his gaze locking onto the approaching elf, his eyes blazing with unbridled fury. "Why do you have to rush to die?" A seductive-looking elf stepped forward, a sweet smile playing on her lips. Twirling her staff in her hand, she glanced at the goblins before her and threatened, "If you dare resist again, you'll end up just like that wretch." Upon hearing her words, a small group of goblins flinched in fear. They knew all too well how powerful the elves were. That power had been burned into their very souls. In their eyes, elves were nothing but synonyms for demons, creatures they should flee from at the first sight. "But you killed our chieftain!" Instead of backing down, Shahai let out a roar and charged forward. Seeing this, the other goblins exchanged a determined glance, nodded, and lunged at the elf together. The elf merely raised a hand, and in the blink of an eye, a magic circle appeared before her, flames flickering within it. Her spellcasting speed was far faster than any of the elves they'd faced before. Boom! Several fireballs shot out of the magic circle, hurtling toward the goblins. A mere handful of fireballs sent all the goblins flying backward in pain. Huh, you're all my property. How could I ever let you escape? The elf walked over to Ye Yan's body and kicked it contemptuously, then addressed the goblins lying on the ground, writhing in agony. Surrender and give up, or this will be your fate. The elf looked down her nose at them, as if her words were an act of mercy. But Shahai struggled to his feet, his expression unyielding, his eyes burning with rage. Goblins will never be slaves. His words struck a chord deep in every goblin's heart, reminding them of all the humiliation they'd endured. One by one, the goblins climbed back to their feet, their faces twisted with fierce resolve as they stared at the elf. Even the goblins who'd initially cowered in fear stepped forward bravely, their eyes blazing with defiance, ready to fight to the death. You lowly monsters! Seeing how ungrateful the goblins were being, the elf's expression darkened, and she snarled angrily, You really are asking for death. As soon as she finished speaking, a terrifying surge of magic power erupted from her body, one ultimate magic circle after another materializing in the air, all aimed directly at the goblins. If you're so eager to die, then I'll grant you your wish. There are plenty more goblins where we came from. Splurt! But right as she was about to unleash her magic, a long sword pierced straight through her body. Ah! The elf gritted her teeth and looked down, then spun around, only to find Ye Yan, who'd been run through the heart, alive and well, grasping the long sword that had pierced her heart from behind. How is this possible? Ah! Ye Yan let out a thunderous roar, grabbed the sword with both hands, and lifted it upward with all his strength, splitting the elf clean in two. Swish! Your lust power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual lust power, plus 4,000. Requirements met. Activate power equivalent exchange. Cost 1,000 lust power. Reward, combat feat, heavy strike. Shink! The mechanical voice rang out. Ye Yan was stunned. It's this cheap this time? Feeling the immense piercing force, Ye Yan didn't hesitate, and accepted the power equivalent exchange without delay. 1,000 lust power consumed. Proficiency reached, skill mastered. Basic combat feat, heavy strike. You said it. Ye Yan stabbed his dagger into the elf's heart and roared at the top of his lungs, Goblins will never be slaves. Goblins will never be slaves. Watching Ye Yan rise from the dead, the goblins all cheered excitedly in unison, Goblins will never be slaves. Charge! Victory is within our grasp. The entrance to the elf village was just ahead, and at the village gate, dozens of goblin bodies lay scattered haphazardly on the ground. All of them had been killed by Elsa, the elf guarding the gate. Damn it, Elsa's at the gate! Seeing the charging goblin horde, she didn't look the least bit flustered, and shouted furiously, You filthy goblins! Die! Look out, Ye Yan warned the goblins! But right as the elf was about to swing her staff and unleash her magic, a goblin crept up silently behind her and stabbed his dagger straight through her heart. How? Elsa spun around to stare at the goblin behind her, her eyes filled with unyielding rage. She hadn't sensed the goblin approaching her at all. What the hell is wrong with this goblin? Nice work. Ye Yan's eyes lit up at the sight. He hadn't expected there to be such a talented goblin among them. Elsa hadn't even noticed Chu Shui sneaking up on her. Oh no, she's dying! Ye Yan cursed under his breath and dashed forward to claim the kill. Swish! One single strike was all it took to finish off the dying Elsa. Your lust power. Activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual lust power, pause 3,000. That's it? No equivalent exchange this time. Chieftain! Chu Shui stepped over the elf's corpse and ran over to Ye Yan's side, staring at him with boundless excitement. Nice work! Ye Yan ruffled Chu Shui's hair and shouted at the goblins behind him, Charge! He didn't notice the faint blush spreading across Chu Shui's green cheeks. He'd praised her. Let's go! Staring at the elf village gate right before them, the goblins were all overcome with excitement. They'd never dared to dream that they would ever escape this hellhole. Into the forest, Ye Yan led the goblins as they ran for their lives, far away from the elf village. They didn't dare stop for even a second, just kept running until one of the goblins couldn't take it anymore and collapsed onto the ground, slumping there completely spent. While they were running, they hadn't felt a thing. But the moment they sat down, all the goblins panted heavily, too exhausted to move another inch. Even Ye Yan was struggling to keep going. He turned to look at the goblins lying sprawled on the ground behind him. Glancing around, only 34 goblins had made it out this time. yet he'd freed well over 100 of them back at the village. "What do you all think?" he asked as the goblins lifted their heads to look at him. "Do you want to head back to your old villages?" Shahai, their de facto leader, knelt down first. The rest of the goblins quickly followed suit, dragging their weary bodies to the ground in a kneel. "Our villages. URO 1337-400 were destroyed long ago when those elves invaded us." Tears streamed down many of the goblins' faces as they spoke. "Those evil, depraved elves would never leave any of our kind alive." Yayan nodded, understanding now. "In other words, once those elves capture you, they'll kill almost every last one of you. From now on, you're our chieftain." All the goblins shouted in unison, bowing their heads to him. Yayan paused, thinking it over. He'd been transported to this world, with no idea what was going on. On top of that, he was now a goblin himself. Trying to get into a human village was practically impossible, and he could never survive alone as a single goblin. If he wanted to make it in this world, having followers by his side, even if they were goblins, would definitely make things a lot easier. Besides, his current power level was still far too weak. All right, Yayan said, making up his mind. He agreed without hesitation. "From this day forward, I will be your chieftain. As long as you follow me, we'll live a life of luxury. But no more kneeling from now on." Yayan helped Shahai to his feet and shouted to all the goblins, "Stand up, yes, sir!" All the goblins looked up at Yayan, a spark of hope flickering in their empty eyes. They would never have to suffer at the hands of those beautiful yet cruel elves again. "Congratulations, you have obtained 34 lust vassals." Yayan glanced down at the panel that had appeared before his eyes. Lust vassals, potential rank 1. Then his gaze shifted to the goblins huffing and puffing as they carried logs to build themselves shelters. Lust vassals, what the hell is potential supposed to mean? And there's even a rank system for it? At this moment, Yiyan was more confused than ever about this world. "Shahai, come here for a second," Yiyan called out to Shahai, who was busy directing the others nearby. "Chieftain, you called for me?" Shahai rushed over in a hurry, his eyes burning with loyalty. Yiyan nodded and repeated the voice he'd heard in his head. He didn't think this was just some coincidence. "Did you hear a divine revelation, chieftain?" Upon hearing Yiyan's words, Shahai's eyes lit up. "Divine revelation?" Yiyan hesitated. So his hunch had been right all along. He wasn't the only one who could hear that voice in his head. "That's right!" Shahai gazed at Yiyan, his eyes brimming with admiration. "It's the voice you hear when the heavens bestow their power upon you. Have you heard it before?" Shahai shook his head. "I'm not gifted enough. I've never heard a thing like that." Suddenly, Chushui popped out from behind Yiyan, startling both him and Shahai. "Don't sneak up on people like that!" Shahai frowned in annoyance, shooting a glare at Chushui, who'd been lazing around doing nothing. "Sneak up, me? I've been right here this whole time." Chushui glared right back, clearly miffed. "Why can that blessing talk to you, chieftain? I really was here the whole time." Yiyan was stunned by Chushui's words. He shot Chushui a glance. "I didn't sense a thing just now." He thought back to how Chushui had snuck around to the gate elf and taken her down with that surprise attack. Yiyan's interest was piqued. "What did you hear?" "It was something like, something about you getting some kind of blessing?" Chushui placed her hands on her head, tilting it from side to side, racking her brain to remember. It was a weird voice, sounded neither male nor female. "Sorry." Chushui looked down, clearly upset at her own failure, her shoulders slumping in disappointment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, even her long green ears drooping down dejectedly. She looked positively adorable. "It's okay," Yayan said, reaching out to pat her head gently, trying to comfort her. He was certain now that the voice Chushui heard was the same one he'd been hearing. But what exactly was this blessing? How was it different from the powers he already had? Or had Chushui simply misheard something? Sure enough, we still know far too little about this world. The main reason is, goblins don't pass down knowledge the way humans do. Whether it's Chushui or Shahai, most of what they know was passed down by the elders of their clans. It's nothing compared to human knowledge. After you heard that voice, did anything change for you? Change? Chushui thought for a moment, her eyes suddenly lighting up. Ever since then,
people have been overlooking me every now and then.
It's like I'm invisible to them. As she spoke, Chushui grew even more dejected. She glanced up at Yayan timidly. "You didn't notice me just now either, chieftain." Upon hearing Chushui's words, Yayan's eyes lit up. This must be the power of that so-called blessing. This blessing of yours, can you activate it on purpose? Ye Yan asked eagerly. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Qiushui hung her head, looking thoroughly discouraged. No, you're already amazing. As he spoke, Ye Yan's expression suddenly turned serious. He said to Qiushui, you need to train this ability from now on. It'll boost your strength by a huge margin. So from now on, can I help you, chieftain? Upon hearing Ye Yan's words, Qiushui's head shot up abruptly, her eyes sparkling like stars. Of course you can, Ye Yan nodded, sending Qiushui into a fit of joy. She clenched her fists tightly. I'll train as hard as I can, and then I'll help you, chieftain. With that said, Ye Yan glanced at the setting sun, his eyes sweeping over the goblins hard at work building shelters. He patted his stomach. Shahai, keep the work going. Qiushui and I are heading out. Let's see if we can hunt down some prey. Ye Yan had originally planned to go out alone, but after discovering Qiushui's talent, he'd changed his mind. Yes, sir, Shahai nodded, his gaze falling on the elated Qiushui, a hint of envy flashing in his eyes. Don't worry, I'll definitely protect you, chieftain, Qiushui said with a cheeky grin. Shahai scoffed disdainfully and turned his head away. The least you can do is not cause trouble for the chieftain. I won't! Qiushui puffed out her cheeks, protesting indignantly. All right then. Ye Yan stood up and patted Shahai on the shoulder. I'm counting on you. Yes, sir. Ye Yan left the campsite with Qiushui. Deep in the forest, a wild boar emerged from the underbrush. Its bristles from head to toe had all turned green from the leaves. Its face was twisted into a bizarre shape. But this strange appearance only added to the boar's imposing aura. It scanned its surroundings, looking distinctly uneasy. Right at that moment, a green blur suddenly appeared behind it. Wild boar! The shout startled the boar. It spun around abruptly and spotted a goblin. It let out an angry snarl on the spot and charged straight at the goblin. Splurt! Qiushui's blade slashed hard at the boar, but the boar's hide was thick and tough. The blade only left a shallow gash on its skin, hardly even a real wound. What? Qiushui exclaimed in shock as the boar barreled toward her. Just as she was about to fight it head-on, Ye Yan's voice rang out from above. Dodge! At the sound of his voice, Qiushui didn't hesitate and leaped out of the way. In the next instant, Ye Yan jumped down from the tree, longsword in hand. The blade glowed with a dazzling light. Heavy strike, swish! The longsword struck the boar's head like a bolt of lightning. The boar's head flew clean off its shoulders. Blood sprayed more than 10 meters away, splattering all over the ground. The mechanical voice rang out in his head. Lust power activated. Kill confirmed wild boar. Gained lust power +1. Combat feat. Heavy strike proficiency +1. Huh? Ye Yan reacted to the mechanical voice, shocked to the core. It's this little again? Every elf he killed gave him thousands of points. He didn't expect a boar to give him the same as an elf. But this was just ridiculous. You okay? Ye Yan turned to Qiushui, who was still on the ground, and asked. Thank you, chieftain. Qiushui was overcome with excitement and tried to rush forward to hug Ye Yan, only for Ye Yan to flick her forehead lightly. This blessing of yours. Didn't I tell you to use it for sneak attacks? Ye Yan was exasperated. Who yells out a warning right before slashing someone? Qiushui nodded sheepishly. She rubbed her stinging forehead and said in a pitiful tone, I thought I could take it down. I don't care what you thought. Don't do that again next time. Ye Yan was utterly speechless. That blessing is so powerful. And you're wasting it like this? Okay, I won't do it again, Qiushui replied at once, sounding obedient. Qiushui's childish streak really left Ye Yan at a loss. He shook his head and said, All right, enough of that. Hurry up and dress the boar. We're having roast meat tonight. Right! By human standards, Qiushui was barely a teenager, yet she'd spent the past few years trapped in that elf hellhole. Those elves are nothing but monsters. Just thinking about it made Ye Yan grit his teeth in anger. When I get strong enough, I'll hunt down every last one of those elves and make them suffer twice the humiliation they put us through. Wait a second. That would just be rewarding them. No, I can't do that. Ye Yan shook his head vigorously. Now's not the time to get caught up in these thoughts. Help! Somebody help me! Suddenly, a woman's shrill, desperate scream cut through the air. Ye Yan's head snapped toward the sound. Behind a tree in the distance, 2 men were cornering a young girl. Help! Let me go! Sniffles! The girl struggled and wept helplessly, but there was no escaping their grasp. One of the men, wearing a lecherous grin, stared greedily at the girl's chest, his eyes bloodshot. Tsk-tusk, turns out she's a virgin too. Hey, lucky day for us, boys. Who would have thought we'd hit the jackpot with two beauties? The other man, a bit stockier, licked his lips, wearing a sleazy smile. He reached out with his right hand and groped the girl's calf, then slid his hand up to her waist. Ha ha ha! The lecherous man cackled obscenely. Today's our lucky day for getting laid. The other man nodded in agreement. Let third brother have his fun first. Then you and I can take turns. Yeah, second brother's right. We're in for a treat. The lecherous man's eyes lit up with excitement. He kicked the girl to the ground and pounced on her right away. No! The girl's desperate cry rang out, yet it fell on utterly deaf ears. Pitter, patter, patter. Suddenly, a stone pelted the lecherous man right on his rear, grinding his movements to a halt. The lecherous man roared in fury. He scrambled to his feet and glared viciously at his surroundings. Damn it, he snarled. Show yourself, coward! Huh. A playful voice suddenly echoed through the air. In the next moment, a dark figure materialized out of nowhere behind the lecherous man. Whoosh! A dagger pierced clean through the man's throat. Gurgle! The lecherous man stared down at the bloody hole in his neck, dumbfounded. His pupils slowly dilated. He craned his neck with great effort and saw a green figure standing behind him offering a kind smile that seemed to mock him. Oops, sorry I didn't finish you off in one go. With that said, Chushui slit the lecherous man's throat clean open. Ah, help! The stocky man beside him had just been about to pounce on the girl. When he heard the commotion behind him, panic instantly seized him. He turned tail and ran for his life. Thud! But he didn't get far. A flash of blade light streaked past. The stocky man didn't even have time to let out a whimper. His brain splattered all over the ground, and he crumpled to the dirt. Lust power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual lust power, plus 100. Your combat feat, heavy strike proficiency, plus 1. That's a bit more like it. Yi Yan twirled his blood-stained longsword casually, a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. So it turns out killing elves isn't the only way to gain power. He finally started to understand what this so-called lust power was all about. He looked down at the girl, who was still trembling with fear, a sinister smirk playing on his lips. You all right? His concern wasn't genuine in the slightest. He was simply planning to find a human, to learn more about this world. And out of the 3 humans he'd just encountered, it was obvious this timid girl would be the easiest to talk to. The girl was stunningly beautiful, with a head of golden hair cascading down her shoulders. Her skin was fair and smooth as silk. Her features were flawlessly proportioned, especially that pure and innocent aura she exuded. It made people want to cherish and protect her, like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. But right now, her clothes were tattered and torn, her once gorgeous dress stained with filth. She'd always been delicate by nature, and now she looked like a delicate rose, teetering on the brink of destruction, the kind that tempted people to pluck and ruin it. But this vulnerable sight held absolutely no appeal for Ye Yan, who'd endured the elves' torment. If anything, it made him feel sick to his stomach, like he was about to throw up. He glanced over to where Chushui had run off to, hiding safely up in a tree, and sighed in relief. Just as Ye Yan was forcing down his nausea to ask the girl some questions, the girl suddenly threw herself into his arms, her voice brimming with gratitude. Thank you for saving me, kind sir. I have nothing to offer in return. Except myself. I vow to spend the rest of my life by your side. As he felt the girl's adoring gaze and clinging embrace. Lust power, plus 1. Insufficient conditions. Cannot recruit as vassal. The moment the girl threw herself into his arms, Ye Yan froze completely, rooted to the spot. A crawling, itching sensation spread across his skin, like a million ants were swarming over him. He felt utterly repulsed, his skin crawling with disgust. It wasn't until the mechanical voice kept buzzing in his head that Ye Yan finally snapped back to his senses. Huh? His eyes widened in sheer shock. This woman was trying to cling to him too. Without a moment's hesitation, Ye Yan shoved the girl away roughly and snapped, "What are you doing?" The girl froze for a second, then her eyes welled up with tears, looking utterly pitiful, her gaze so sorrowful it could melt anyone's heart. Kind sir, I only want to repay you for saving my life. Please don't turn me down. As she spoke, the girl took a step closer to Ye Yan, her cheeks flushing bright red, little hearts dancing in her eyes. If it weren't for you, sir, I would have been defiled by those men long ago. Now I have nothing left in this world. All I can offer is myself to repay your kindness. Sir, whatever you want from me, just take it. With that, she reached for the tattered remains of her clothes. Stop! Ye Yan roared in a rage. What the hell is wrong with this girl? Is this what all humans in this world are like? Throwing themselves at people like this after being saved? Stop! Why should I stop? Am I not beautiful enough for you, sir? Anaya paid no heed to Ye Yan's words. Her eyes locked onto his, burning with infatuation. She tossed her last remaining undergarment onto the ground. Her figure was slender and well-proportioned, her curves soft and alluring. A perfect hourglass shape. Radiating irresistible charm, she was no less beautiful or seductive than any elf he'd ever seen. But this sight only dredged up those painful memories buried deep in his heart. Ye Yan's eyes flew wide open. He pointed a trembling finger at Anaya, his hand shaking violently, unable to squeeze out a single word for a long moment. You're so cruel. He spat out the words, then spun around to glare at Chu Shui, who was hiding nearby, his voice dripping with annoyance. Are you just going to stand there? If we don't get out of here now, your chieftain is done for. Right! Chu Shui scrambled out of her hiding spot in a hurry and bolted away as fast as her legs could carry her. Told you, chieftain, females are nothing but trouble. The two of them fled the scene in a flash, leaving Anaya standing there, completely dumbfounded. What just happened? As the memory of what she'd just done came flooding back, a deep blush spread across Anaya's fair skin. She covered her burning cheeks with both hands and whispered shyly, I was so bold just now. She glanced nervously around her and quickly pulled her tattered clothes back on. They were ragged and torn, but at least they covered the parts that needed covering. Right at that moment, several knights and guards came running from not far away. When they saw Anaya was unharmed, they immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then they glared angrily and chased after the direction Chu Shui had fled. Sister Akara! Anaya hurried over to them, calling out to the woman leading the group. When the woman saw Anaya, she broke into a delighted smile. But when her eyes fell on Anaya's tattered, dirty clothes, a look of worry crossed her face. Anaya, are you hurt? Does anything hurt? Don't worry, Sister Akara. My injuries are nothing serious. Anaya shook her head. But then she remembered what she'd just done, a flush creeping up her pretty cheeks. Is that so? Akara shot Anaya a surprised glance, her eyes drifting to the bodies on the ground. It was a goblin, sir, who saved me. As she said this, Anaya's face turned even redder. A goblin? Akara's expression froze for a second. She looked utterly shocked. Just my damn luck, Ye Yan muttered angrily as he walked ahead. He'd originally planned to leave behind someone who seemed normal, to ask a few questions about this world. Never in a million years would he have guessed that the girl who looked the most normal was actually the craziest one of all, throwing herself at people left and right. Absolutely outrageous. Is this what all humans are like? Ye Yan stroked his chin, deep in thought. It's not impossible. After all, if elves can turn out that way, then humans could definitely be the same. Nope, not really, Chu Shui chimed in, following behind Ye Yan, dragging the wild boar's corpse along with a grin. Most humans are pretty reserved. They don't go throwing themselves at people like that. Not like those elves. As she said this, Chu Shui's expression darkened. Then why did she pounce on me like that? Total ingratitude. Maybe it's 'cause you're just too charming, chieftain. As she spoke, Chu Shui ducked her head shyly, a faint blush tinting her green cheeks. Charming? Yi Yang glanced down at his own green skin, a few black lines appearing on his forehead. This skin color? I fail to see how that's supposed to be charming. While goblins in this world weren't as lecherous and hideous as the ones described in the novels from his previous life, they still weren't the type to throw themselves at people at the drop of a hat. Oh, right! Suddenly, Ye Yan remembered something. He turned to Chu Shui, who was still hanging her head and avoiding eye contact, and asked, "What do humans think of our goblin race?" Something had felt off to him earlier, when that girl had seen them as goblins. She hadn't looked the least bit afraid. It seemed like it wasn't just because of their appearance. To other races, we goblins are known for being kind and gentle, harmless to humans and animals alike. As she spoke, Chu Shui puffed out her chest proudly. Huh? Yi Yan exclaimed in shock. He thought this world must have gone mad. Otherwise, how could there be such goblins? But being kind and gentle, harmless to all, in a forest like this, in a world where the strong prey on the weak, wasn't exactly a compliment. It meant that goblins were easy targets for bullying. The times really have changed. If that was the case, would they be able to make contact with humans? After all, he'd been a human in his previous life. If he got the chance to coexist with humans, it wouldn't be half bad. Besides, there were no female goblins among their group. To continue their race, they'd have to rely on other species. As for that girl from earlier, Ye Yan decided it was best to stay far away from her. But after hearing Chushui say that humans had no ill intentions toward them, Ye Yan let out a sigh of relief. That makes sense. So the abnormal ones were the elves. And that girl, it must have just been his bad luck to run into them. That girl was just an anomaly. With that thought, Ye Yan felt much more at ease. On their way back, Ye Yan and Qushui hunted another wild boar. The two goblins dragged the boars back to their campsite, only to be impressed by the sight that greeted them. In such a short amount of time, 6 small wooden huts had already been built. They were crude and simple, but infinitely better than sleeping in the open. "Chieftain, you're back!" Shahai lit up when he saw Ye Yan, and ran over to greet him. The other goblins, seeing this, all swarmed forward eagerly. "Chieftain, look, look! Aren't we amazing?" "Yeah," Ye Yan nodded in approval. "Not bad at all. I didn't know you guys were so handy." "Ha! This is just the basics for us," one of the goblins said proudly. "Because of those depraved elves, we've had to flee from place to place our whole lives. If we didn't have this skill, we'd never have a roof over our heads. To reward you all for your hard work, we're having whole roasted boar tonight." Ye Yan dragged the wild boar out. A flurry of chattering broke out at once. But when the goblins caught sight of the boar's corpse, they all hesitated. "What's wrong?" Ye Yan frowned and asked when he saw this. One goblin tried to speak up, but was cut off by Qushui, who snapped sharply. "Do you all intend to let the chieftain's kindness go to waste?" "But shut it." Shahai let out a cold snort and picked out a dozen goblins from the crowd. "You lot, come with me. Let's handle this boar." The goblins looked hesitant, wanting to speak but holding back. Ye Yan's brow furrowed slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that the others were being uncharacteristically unenthusiastic. "What's going on here?" "Chieftain, go rest for a bit. We've got this under control." Qushui smiled and pulled Ye Yan aside, then huffed and puffed as she went to start a fire. Soon enough, the boar was cleaned and prepared. Pieces of meat were skewered on wooden sticks and set over the flames to roast. The moon hung high, and the stars dotted the sky. The bonfire in the dark night lit up the circle of goblins with their green faces. Sizzle! Sizzle! The pork fat crackled and popped as it roasted over the fire. "All right," Ye Yan picked up a skewer and took a bite. It tastes really bloody. They didn't drain the blood properly. On top of that, there were no seasonings. It was about as tasty as chewing on wood. But having gone so long without eating, Ye Yan didn't care about its flaws at all. However, getting some spices from the human villages was now officially added to his to-do list. "I'd die if I had to eat like this every day." At least that's what Ye Yan, the transmigrator, thought. "Aren't you guys gonna eat?" Ye Yan noticed the goblin's lack of movement, and his brow furrowed again. Ever since he'd come back with the hunted boar, he'd had a nagging feeling that something was off about the goblins. "We're not hungry." "Not hungry?" Ye Yan's gaze drifted to the fruit cores discarded off to the side, and he chuckled. "So you guys fill up on just fruits, huh? We're just used to it." The goblins hung their heads. "We've always eaten nothing but fruits." "What in the world?" Ye Yan scanned the group of goblins, his eyes finally settling on Qushui and Shahai. "We've never eaten meat in our lives, not since we were little." Shahai paused for a moment, then added, So we just don't eat it." Ye Yan finally understood why the goblins had been acting so strangely. It turned out they just didn't eat meat. "No wonder you're all so weak and get bullied all the time." Ye Yan suddenly found himself questioning. The world's very setting. Did they mix up goblins and elves or something? Though the elves' overwhelming strength was definitely real enough. "Eat it, all of you!" "How are you supposed to build strength? Surviving on just fruits?" But one goblin tried to argue, only to be cut off by Ye Yan's thunderous roar. "If you still consider me your chieftain, then eat." Qushui was the first to pick up a skewer of meat. Without a moment's hesitation, she took a big bite. Delicious. Shahai was the second. The moment the meat touched his tongue, his eyes lit up with delight. He'd never imagined meat could taste this good. Seeing Qushui and Shahai eating with such relish, the other goblins tentatively took a bite too. They were instantly hooked. So delicious, who knew meat could taste this good? Watching the goblins devouring the meat bite after bite, Ye Yan felt a warm sense of satisfaction. To him, the meat was bland and unappetizing, but to these goblins who'd never tasted meat before, it was the most delicious treat they'd ever had. Eat up. The more you eat, the stronger you'll get. Yiyan laughed heartily, watching the goblins wolf down their food, feeling thoroughly pleased. This is more like it. With a bit of salt and chili, this would be even better. Oh, right. Next time we need to drain all the blood first. Yiyan suddenly cut himself off as he felt a faint tremor beneath his feet. A low rumble reached his ears. Ready for battle! Oink, oink! As the grunts grew louder, the ground began to shake violently. What's going on? What's happening? The goblins reluctantly put down their meat skewers and turned toward the source of the noise. There, charging straight at them from not far away, were 4 or 5 wild boars. After taking in their numbers, Yiyan let out a sigh of relief. With over 30 goblins on their side, taking down these boars should be a piece of cake. But before Yiyan could even open his mouth, the goblins erupted into complete chaos. It's them! The boars are so scary. In the blink of an eye, the goblins dropped their meat and scattered in all directions, scrambling to find places to hide. Run, don't panic! Yiyan shouted at the fleeing goblins, but it was no use. The goblins were completely paralyzed by fear, squawking in panic, and couldn't hear a word he said. Damn it! He truly couldn't understand what the goblins were so afraid of. Even he, a former ordinary human from another world, wasn't this scared. Fortunately, not all the goblins were cowards. Shahai gripped his longsword tightly, his hands shaking, and charged forward. Kyushui followed close behind, without a moment's hesitation, and pinned down one of the boars. The remaining 4 boars chased after the other squawking goblins. Yiyan glanced at the fleeing goblins, who had no sense of discipline whatsoever. He gripped his longsword tightly, and a faint glow emanated from the blade. Gritting his teeth, he charged forward. He shouldn't have placed any hope in these goblins. After all, the sight of them escaping the elf prison, and even picking up weapons to face the elves, must have all been a lie. Die! Yiyan roared in fury. His longsword glowed faintly as he swung it, cutting a perfect arc through the air, and bringing it crashing down on the boar in front of him. Swish! Charged heavy strike! He decapitated the unsuspecting boar that had been busy chasing the other goblins. Your lust power activated. Absorbing kill target. Individual lust power +2. Your combat feat, thrust proficiency, punning 1. Nice! Yiyan tightened his grip on the sword and grinned. I've still got it. Crap. But when he turned around, he saw 2 more boars charging straight toward him. Without hesitation, Yiyan turned tail and ran for his life. His heavy strike required time to charge, and his thrust attack wasn't powerful enough to guarantee a one-hit kill. Just then, the mechanical voice blared in his head. Zealous Lust Vassals unlocked. Combat feat acceleration learned. System alert. You may temporarily wield all combat feats of your Zealous Lust Vassals. What? Yiyan jolted at the voice, his eyes widening in shock. What the hell is zealous supposed to mean? When did my vassals even become zealous? Zealous Lust Vassals. Yiyan shook off the confusion. Something felt off, but now wasn't the time to overthink it. With the boars hot on his heels, Yiyan didn't hesitate. He activated Combat Feat Acceleration LV1 on the spot. In an instant, his body felt light as a feather, his speed skyrocketing. He spotted a large tree ahead and gritted his teeth, planted his foot on the tree trunk, and pushed off with a backward leap, launching himself high above the charging boars. One boar couldn't stop in time and slammed straight into the tree. Seizing the opportunity, Yiyan channeled his power mid-air to activate Wei Heavy Strike. A faint glow flickering along his sword's edge. Swish! Yiyan came crashing down from the sky, his blade slicing clean through the boar's neck, dropping the beast dead on the spot. The remaining 2 boars froze for a split second when they saw their companion fall, then turned tail and fled as fast as their legs could carry them. Yiyan didn't bother chasing them. Kyushui and Shahai had already finished off their own target. Shahai had kept the boar occupied, while Kyushui darted in for the kill with a single well-placed strike. Pant! Pant! Shahai collapsed to the ground, completely spent. Your zealous vassal Shahai has leveled up. Your stats have received a minor boost. Yiyan started to walk over to help Shahai up, then froze abruptly, his eyes lighting up with a fiery glint as he stared at Shahai. See, Chieftain, what's wrong? A chill ran down Shahai's spine, and he looked up nervously at Yiyan approaching him. Nothing. Yan shook his head, already plotting a brutal training regimen for Shahai in his mind. That was amazing, Chieftain. Chieftain! Chieftain! The goblins cheered and whooped, their eyes glued to the boar corpses on the ground, saliva dripping from their mouths. These 3 boars would be more than enough to feed them for days. Chieftain, should we roast another one right now? You're so awesome, Chieftain. The goblins chattered excitedly, their voices buzzing, but none of them noticed that Yan's face had clouded over. Gradually, some of the goblins picked up on the shift in mood. They lowered their hands and looked at Yan with worried expressions. A few clueless goblins were still cheering loudly with their hands raised. Shut up! Shahai roared at the top of his lungs. Kyushui wore a scowl. It was crystal clear that the other goblins' pathetic display had left her equally displeased. No one wanted to see their own kin freeze up and do nothing at all when danger came knocking, descending into chaos. With only one thought in mind, run? That's enough cheering. Yan's face was like thunder, his gaze sweeping over the trembling goblins, who were all watching him nervously, waiting for his wrath. He was utterly disappointed in them. When those boars charged at them, not a single one of them had even thought about fighting back. If they'd run from the elves, he might have understood, and wouldn't have been this angry. After all, the elves' magic was overwhelmingly powerful. But this time, their opponents were just 5 ordinary wild boars. 30-something goblins couldn't even take on a handful of boars? Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Only Shahai and Kyushui had stepped up to help just now. The goblins hung their heads in deep shame. Chieftain! Shahai tried to say something, but Yan cut him off sharply. Don't you dare speak. Shahai could tell at a glance that Yan was truly furious. He clamped his mouth shut at once, obeying the order. Why didn't any of you pick up your weapons and fight just now? Yan stared sternly at the goblins, all with their heads bowed in front of him. He demanded, Did you choose me as your chieftain just so I could protect you forever? No, chieftain, a goblin mumbled softly. Then answer me this. Other than Shahai and Kyushui, why didn't a single one of you stand up? I don't know how, another goblin replied timidly. Ever since they were born, they'd spent their lives running from elves, surviving on nothing but wild fruits they'd foraged. They'd never hunted, not actively, not passively, never at all. You don't know how? Yan scoffed coldly. Or are you just too afraid to try? We've never taken a life before. A young goblin piped up, his voice barely a whisper. If you don't kill those boars will kill you, Yan said, his tone dripping with frustration. My people are supposed to be brave and fierce warriors, not spineless cowards who cower at the sight of danger. Do you think refusing to take a life makes you some kind of noble, kind-hearted beings? Yes, goblins are a kind race. We don't take lives, someone muttered weakly. That is not an excuse, Yan roared, and it sure as hell isn't a shield to hide behind. Do you want to go back to that elf hellhole? Do you want to be enslaved for the rest of your lives? If any of you have even the tiniest thought like that, then get out of here right now. I have no place for cowards in my clan. At Yan's words, the goblins hung their heads even lower. They were all extremely young goblins. After all, that was the only reason they'd survived. The elves' endless cycle of exploitation. And having been enslaved by the elves for so long, their already limited life experience had become even more pitifully scarce. But that was no excuse, least of all to Yan. He still vividly remembered the elf village, how the elves would hunt them down relentlessly, especially now that he'd killed several of their kind. They would never let him off the hook, which meant his time was running out. He didn't have the luxury to play guardian and coddle these goblins, and he sure as hell wasn't going to act as their babysitter. He was no great savior. Having transmigrated into this world, all he wanted was to survive, and then kill every last elf who'd defiled him. The memory of the elves' leering smiles sent a surge of unquenchable anger boiling up inside him. Yan fell silent. The goblins kept their heads bowed, not daring to utter a word. For a long moment, a heavy silence hung over the clearing. Seeing they had nothing more to say, Yan had no intention of lingering here any longer. He let out a cold snort, turned on his heel and walked away, stepping into one of the wooden huts. Sigh. Yan let out a long, weary breath. He'd been far too naive. Or perhaps he'd been too quick to project the goblins from his past life novels onto this group. He'd expected them to be wicked, cunning, lecherous creatures. But the truth was the complete opposite. These goblins were so timid they didn't even dare to take a life. He suddenly found himself doubting whether he'd made the right choice becoming their chieftain. He even considered grabbing Chushui and running for his life. He was no saint, nor was he some chosen one destined for greatness. He was just an ordinary person who'd happened to be reborn as a goblin, with a little bit of power at his disposal. He couldn't even guarantee his own survival, let alone theirs. Ye Yin ran his hand along the rough wooden floor, glancing around the small space. The hut was completely empty, but considering how quickly they'd built it, it was actually pretty impressive. It wasn't half bad. If he were strong enough, keeping these goblins around as laborers wouldn't be a bad idea. They could make for decent underlings, but he was still far too weak. If they didn't change for the better, he would never be able to protect them. Chieftain? Chushui pushed the door open gently and stepped inside slowly, her eyes filled with worry. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke up, defending the other goblins. They were just caught off guard by the scare, that's all. I promise you, it won't happen again. Ye Yen paused for a second, not quite sure what to say. It's not their cowardice that disappoints me. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Chieftain? Chushui edged closer suddenly, her lips pursed nervously. She summoned up her courage and whispered, What if we leave? The two of us just go together. Chushui's voice trailed off, growing fainter and fainter, as if she was terrified of something. We don't have to care about the others. At Chushui's words, Yuan turned his head sharply,
shooting her a look of genuine surprise.
If that's what you want, Chieftain, I'll go with you, anywhere. I'll always listen to you. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I'll kill whoever you order me to kill. Her voice started to shake, cracking with emotion. Please don't leave me behind, Chieftain. The young goblin stepped closer, her bright green eyes glistening with unshed tears, looking utterly pitiful. If goblins in this world weren't a one-gender species, Yu Yan would have sworn she was a girl. Just leave together? The words left Ye Yan with a strange, unsettling feeling. Since when had this kid grown so attached to him? They'd barely known each other for 3 whole days, and he hadn't done anything remotely heroic to earn this kind of loyalty. In Ye Yan's eyes, he'd only broken open their prison, freed the goblins, killed a few elves, and led them out of the elf village. Every single thing he'd done was for himself. These goblins had just been pawns in his plan all along. Chieftain? After waiting in vain for a reply, Kyushui stared up at him with those big, pleading eyes, like a tiny kitten afraid of being abandoned. Yan sighed and placed a hand on her head. Don't worry. I have no intention of leaving any of the goblins behind. At the very least, he'd never abandon Shahai and Kyushui. They were 2 promising kids. A lone goblin could never survive for long in this world. Thank you, Chieftain. Overjoyed, Kyushui threw herself into his arms. Ye Yan pushed her away in disgust. Seriously, what was wrong with this kid? She was way too clingy. Goblins in this world had no concept of different genders. They were basically all male. But as Ye Yan took a closer look at Kyushui, he suddenly realized she looked surprisingly tomboyish. Chieftain? Kyushui tilted her head, a look of confusion crossing her delicate features. Nothing. Ye Yan shook his head. What was he even thinking? Had the elves' torture really messed him up this badly? Driving him to such absurd conclusions. The mere thought of it filled Ye Yan with an even deeper hatred for the elves. Tap, tap, tap. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed outside, followed by Shahai's respectful voice. Chieftain, may I speak with you outside for a moment? At the sound of Shahai's voice, Ye Yan blinked in surprise. He'd always held Shahai in high regard. After all, he was the only one besides Chushui who dared to stand his ground in danger. He stood up from his spot, with Chushui trotting along behind him. When he stepped outside the hut, he found all the other goblins lined up neatly at the door, grinning sheepishly at him. What's this? Ye Yan's gaze swept over the filthy, disheveled goblins and spoke up. Chieftain, give us another chance! We swear we'll do better next time. As they spoke, the goblins stepped aside in unison, revealing the boar corpse lying behind them. Ye Yan's eyes widened in mild surprise. Looking at the countless gashes and bruises covering the boar's body, he knew instantly it wasn't one of the 2 he'd killed, nor was it the one Chushui and Shahai had taken down together. He took a closer look and saw that every single goblin was covered in injuries of varying severity. Some even had broken legs. But despite their wounds, they refused to collapse. One foot propped them up, and they leaned on the goblins beside them, struggling to stay upright. You guys, Ye Yan's gaze flicked across them, about to say something more, when the goblins dropped to their knees as one, pleading earnestly. Chieftain, we promise it won't happen again. Please don't abandon us. Looking down at the kneeling goblins, the fleeting thought of leaving everything behind and running away vanished completely. I told you before. Ye Yan wiped the sand out of his eyes and snapped sharply. No kneeling, get up right now. The goblins lifted their heads, glancing at him nervously, then exchanging uncertain looks. No one dared to stand up, until Shahai spoke up. The chieftain has forgiven you all, chieftain. The goblins still didn't rise, their eyes fixed unblinkingly on Ye Yan. Ye Yan let out a soft laugh at the sight. He walked over to the goblin with the broken leg and raised his hand. In an instant, a soft pink glow enveloped his palm, and he waved it gently over the goblin's injured leg. Everyone watched in awe as the leg healed at a visible rate. It's fixed! It's really fixed! The goblin exclaimed in delight, about to drop to his knees again to thank Ye Yan, when a hand stopped him. Stand up, I said no kneeling, Ye Yan ordered firmly. Chieftain, what's your name? The goblin asked timidly. My name is Mura. Mura, no more kneeling from now on, Ye Yan said. He helped Mura to his feet, then turned to the other goblins and shouted, Did you hear me? No kneeling ever! All of you stand up! The goblins were overcome with emotion, tears streaming down their green cheeks. We won't let you down again, chieftain. No, Ye Yan shook his head slowly. You're right about one thing. The truth is, if a clan panics at the first sign of danger, it will never survive in this world. The problem is, you're all just too weak. From now on, every single one of you is going to train hard. I want you to be strong enough to face danger head-on, to destroy it before it destroys us. Training? Confusion crossed the goblins' faces. The word was completely foreign to them. They'd never heard of such a thing. Yes, training means getting stronger, Ye Yan explained. He looked at the bewildered goblins and smiled. Tell me, do you want to get stronger? At the word stronger, the goblins' faces lit up with excitement. Yes, of course we do. But there's no turning back once you start, Ye Yan warned them, making sure they understood the stakes. No turning back, they roared in unison, louder this time. Their voices were full of determination. Ye Yan's expression turned serious. He raised his voice, addressing all the goblins. Here's your first task. Starting tomorrow, every single one of you will do 1,000 push-ups a day, 1,000 sit-ups, and 1,000 squats. Huh? What are those? Ye Yan smiled faintly. The good stuff is coming right up. Ye Yan proceeded to show the goblins how to do a proper push-up, sit-up, and squat. Who would have thought this body's actually pretty strong? Wonder if it's always been like this, or if it's because of the power of lust. All right, do 100 of each tonight to help you sleep. Upon hearing Ye Yan's words, the goblins didn't object. They agreed right away. In the blink of an eye, over 30 goblins started training in this weird way. It's that simple? Mullah frowned in confusion. Is this even gonna work? Mullah, who was in the middle of a sit-up, suddenly heard the chief's voice and panicked instantly. Chief, I didn't mean anything by it. He'd thought for sure the chief would scold him, but instead the chief just gave him a kind smile and patted him on the shoulder. No worries, if it's easy, just do more. Mullah thought to himself. He'd just promised to listen to the chief. Yet here he was doubting him, and the chief wasn't even punishing him. Mullah was deeply touched. The chief is so kind and gentle. So he picked up the pace a little, hoping to earn a compliment from the chief. Then he instantly regretted it. After he knocked out 50 sit-ups, his stomach started to ache. As the pain grew sharper and sharper, he could feel his whole body draining of strength. He turned his head to look, and saw the other goblins were in the same boat. He let out a sigh of relief, but still gritted his teeth and powered through. Little did he know, the real nightmare was just getting started. By the time he hit 30 push-ups, his hands were numb as hell. He couldn't even feel where his hands were anymore. And when he got to 20 more, he couldn't lift his left arm at all. Then his legs gave out. By the time he finished 60 push-ups, he was too weak to stand up. He just collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, waiting for someone to help him. But no one came. When he got to 79 push-ups, his entire body was screaming in pain. He could barely even breathe. Finally, when he dragged himself to 100, he passed out cold. On top of that, his abdomen started cramping, like someone was stabbing him with knives. What are you all dawdling for? Get back to work once you've rested enough. Ye Yan's voice rang out right next to his ear. Mullah jolted awake in a panic. He forced himself to keep going. This workout is way too brutal. Ye Yan sat on the big rock. His eyes drifted away from those half-dead goblins. and fixed on the panel in front of him. Lust Follower, Piety Level 1. Can this level only be upgraded through battles? Yeah, you wanted to level it up. Because if his followers gained levels, he would get some feedback too. Also, this so-called level, does every race have it? Or is it exclusive to his followers? Or is he the only one with this special trait? The reason Ye Yan had these thoughts was because of his unique panel, different from others. His gaze fell on his own status panel. Name, Ye Yan. Race, Goblin. Stage, Growth. Authority, Lust. Equivalent exchange. Blessing talent, None. Racial talent, Ignore. Promotion isolation, High energy. Combat feat, Heavy strike. LV5 100. Thrust LV1 100. Magic. NA. The once super brief details of the Lust Follower had expanded. Or rather, these were the typical panel stats you'd see in novels. The only thing that annoyed Ye Yan was he couldn't check the Lust Authority directly. And what exactly the equivalent exchange did. He had to figure it out by himself. Or wait until that mechanical voice popped up. To learn how to use them? Especially Lust. It felt like there was a catch to it. But so what if there was a catch? Just the Lust. Authority that could heal injuries. Yogan would never give it up. Sure, it consumed that so-called Lust energy, but Ye Yan didn't have to worry too much about it. He just needed to kill a few elves. If that didn't work, Ye Yan thought about the Lust energy that surged up. No way. Absolutely not. Yo Yan rubbed his arms. With a look of disgust, Chieftain's here too. At that moment, Sha Hai came running over, with a big smile on his face. I'm done. Got any more tasks for me? Watching Sha Hai's excited look, Ye Yan froze. It wasn't anything else, but that Sha Hai's once simple panel had changed. Name, Sha Hai. Race, Goblin. Stage, Growth, Lust Follower. Fanaticism Level 2. Talent, Strength and Numbers. Combat feat, Acceleration N1. Magic, None. It had grown a lot more detailed. But compared to his own panel, it was still missing some things. Like blessings and authorities, for example. When he thought about the connection between Sha Hai and the other goblins, Ye Yan could only think of one thing. Was it the difference between fanaticism and piety among the Lust Followers? Could it be that how much he could see depended on how the Lust Followers felt about him? It felt like Ye Yan had grasped something important. Ye Yan waved his hand, shaking it in front of his own eyes. Huh? Ye Yan snapped back to his senses and asked, What's up? I'm done, Sha Hai said proudly. Is there anything else I need to do, Chieftain? Ye Yan didn't expect Sagai to be in such great shape that he could finish the task so quickly. Was it because of his level 2? Nope, nothing else. You can go to bed after you're done. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. Ye Yan paused for a second, remembering Sha Hai's strength and numbers talent. Then he said, From now on during training, keep an eye on the others while they work. Sha Hai replied solemnly. Ye Yan calmed down and took a sip of water. Right at that moment, that familiar mechanical voice echoed. Your diehard follower Chu Shui has leveled up by 1. Your stats have received a minor boost. The second the mechanical voice faded, Ye Yan could feel it. His physical strength had gotten a noticeable enhancement, and this boost was even bigger than the one he got from Sha Hai earlier. Chieftain! Just then, a delicate voice came from behind him. Splutter! Ye Yan, who'd just registered the word diehard from the mechanical voice, spat out a mouthful of water, which landed squarely on the face of Chu Shui, who'd popped up out of nowhere. Chieftain? Chu Shui looked wronged and blinked her eyes, her emerald green eyes staring straight at Ye Yan. Ye Yan was still in a daze, his eyes fixed firmly on the panel that had appeared in front of him. What the hell is diehard? Why didn't he get any mechanical voice notification about fanaticism earlier? How did it jump straight to diehard all of a sudden? At that moment, Chu Shui's status panel showed up. Name Chu Shui. Race Goblin. Stage Growth, Lust Follower. Diehard. Level 2, Authority, None. Blessing, Silent Blessing. Talent, None, Racial. Talent, Ignore. Promotion, Isolation. Feat, No notification. You can temporarily use all feats and blessings of your diehard Lust Followers. Silent Blessing. Look at this name. Ye Yan could roughly guess what it does. It hides your aura, making you hard to detect. That's why Chu Shui always flies under people's radar. But Ye Yan thought it wasn't that simple. He'd never heard of this before. Chu Shui went from the prologue stage to the frenzy machine voice stage, but now she's jumped straight to the death stage. There's no way she skipped prologue and frenzy right from the start, and went straight to death, right? What's more, she can actually use the blessing of the death affinity, the Wuxi blessing that can erase your aura, to be exact. Does that mean he'll never have to worry about being detected when ambushing someone from now on? Reminder, the Lust Authority has not been fully unlocked. Borrowed affinity blessings can only be used once a day. Each use lasts for 3 minutes. You can consume lust energy to extend the duration, so it's not that overpowered after all. But this is still pretty good. It can be used as a stealth trick. It's just that the Lust Authority hasn't been fully unlocked yet. The clan leader heard Chu Shui's voice. Yi Yan snapped back to his senses. He apologized again. Sorry. It's okay. Chu Shui licked her lips and gave Ye Yan a sweet smile. That smile sent a chill down Ye Yan's spine. He took a step back involuntarily. Clan leader, what's wrong? Seeing Ye Yan step back, Chu Shui approached, confused. Is there something on my face? Why are you staring at me like that? No, nothing. Ye Yan shook his head and took another step back. Why are you stepping back? Watching Ye Yan's actions, Chu Shui puffed out her cheeks. She frowned, looking really dejected. No, it's nothing. Suddenly, Ye Yan thought of something. He changed the subject. Did you hear that rooster crow just now? That so-called heavenly roar? Heavenly roar? Chu Shui repeated. She shook her head and denied it. Nope. From the start of training till now, Chu Shui had never heard that heavenly roar. No? Yuan rubbed his chin. So that level is something brought by his Lust Authority. It's not a valid reference. Ye Yan didn't dare jump to conclusions, even though the status panel was right in front of him. Is it possible that only he, a goblin, has it? By the way, have you felt any boost in your strength or speed? Ye Yan followed up. Huh? Yeah, I have. Chu Shui raised her hand and flexed her muscles a little. She grinned sheepishly. I was so tired during training just now. But when it ended, I suddenly felt light as a feather. A lot of the exhaustion from the training faded away, and my strength went up a bit too. Yosian nodded. He hesitated for a moment, then asked on the spot, Can you see the blessings on yourself? Blessings? Chu Shui recalled what was said earlier that day. She shook her head. Nope, can't see 'em. Could it be that only he can see them? Ye Yan grew skeptical. Or is it just that Chu Shui and the others can't? What's wrong? Chu Shui saw Ye Yan frowning and asked in concern. He replied, Nothing. It's fine. Ye Yan shook his head. He ruffled Chu Shui's hair and said, Go get some sleep after training. We've got more training tomorrow. Felt the surge of strength she'd just gotten. Ye Yan looked at the goblins still struggling to hang on. His eyes lit up. Maybe being their clan leader wasn't such a bad thing after all. It was such a shame back then. He was determined to train his fine clansmen into muscle-bound warriors. Impossible, suddenly. The goblins, gritting their teeth to keep going, felt a chill run down their spines. What was going on with everyone today? Mullah frowned, confused, and thought for a second. Then he stopped thinking about it. He really didn't have the energy to spare for that right now. I'm so tired, I feel like I'm gonna die. He still preferred building houses, playing with wood and stones. But the moment he thought of the clan leader, he immediately pushed himself back up and kept going. He wasn't about to get left behind. Sunlight filtered through the treetops in the forest, casting dappled light and shadow on the ground. A troop of beautiful, enchanting elves marched forward slowly. They wore light, sheer dresses that fluttered with their steps. Their graceful movements made it seem like every step was a dance. Yet, in stark contrast to this beautiful scene, behind them followed a group of goblins with their hands bound by rough ropes, their faces etched with despair. Fear was written all over the goblins' faces. They knew, falling into the hands of these elves, infamous for their lasciviousness, the days ahead would be as painful as hell. Crack! A sharp whip crack rang out. One goblin had lagged just a little behind and got lashed hard by the elf in front. He tumbled to the ground. Hurry up! The elf holding his rope glared at him, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. She stuck out her slender tongue and licked her lips slowly, as if savoring the delicious treat that was about to come. Or are you dying to be devoured right here? The goblin shuddered violently in terror, scrambling to his feet. He shook his head frantically. No, please don't! The other elves watched his pathetic display and burst into raucous laughter. Their laughter echoed through the forest. sound grating and harsh. At the very front of the procession, the elven leader, Vidona, suddenly came to a halt. Her brows were tightly furrowed, her sharp gaze sweeping across the path ahead. The other elves followed her line of sight, only to see that they had already entered the boundaries of the elven village. But the sight that greeted them left them utterly stunned. The once peaceful and serene elven village now had its ground stained red with blood. Goblin corpses littered the area, scattered haphazardly everywhere. Yet not a single elven corpse was to be seen. But the elves paid this no mind. What in the world is going on here? F, one of the elves behind Vidona, had a dark look on her face, that pretty face which usually wore a smile. She roared in anger, "Elves! Find out what's going on at once. Figure out exactly what happened here." F's voice echoed through the night air. She addressed the elven warriors behind her, her tone brimming with undeniable authority. The elven warriors sprang into action immediately, leaving behind only the trembling goblins. They huddled together helplessly. "Hurry up!" Meanwhile, the two rearmost goblins were whispering softly, but Kongling, the scrawny one, looked hesitant. Stone snarled at him in a low voice, "Go!" F let out a cold chuckle. Stone suddenly lunged at Effie and roared at Kongling, "I can't go any further." "But you can. I'll come back for you guys." Kongling wiped away his tears. Trying to step forward, F dragged Stone along. Stone was being pulled along forcefully. But just as F was about to grab Kongling, the air rippled with distortion. Sensing that something was wrong, F tried to use magic to seal off the space. But it was too late. Kongling vanished in an instant, as if he had never existed at all. Vidona's eyes narrowed slightly. The power of the blessing. "I'll send someone to catch him." F was filled with regret. That a measly goblin had escaped right under her nose. Vidona shook her head. "Do as you see fit." F gritted her teeth and kicked Stone flying. Thud! A mouthful of blood spurted from Stone's lips. "Wait and see, I'll treat you real nice later." F stared at Stone and snarled viciously. Before long, an elven warrior returned to report his findings. "Reporting, Lady F. The bodies of over 30 goblins are missing from the village." "What?" F's face darkened instantly. Could it be they ran away on their own? Maybe all of them escaped. "The 4 elven warriors stationed here are all dead. Return to the embrace of the World Tree." "Who on earth did this?" F's face was as black as thunder. Her ample bosom heaved violently with rage. Who else could it be? The speaker was a delicate-looking elf who was covered in bulging muscles, Verna. It's either those greedy, money-grubbing adventurers or those brainless, brutish orcs. No, I think the goblins escaped on their own. Alice walked over after finishing her investigation and explained to Effie, "Look over here. Other than our elven footprints, only goblin tracks are left here. I checked earlier. Not a single piece of treasure, food, or weapon is missing. If adventurers had done this, they'd never have left the treasure and weapons behind. And if orcs were responsible, there's no way the food would still be here. It would have been eaten by those gluttonous orcs. So what you're saying is," F narrowed her eyes, her aura turning dangerously menacing, "that those goblins, who've been living on the brink of death every day, suddenly found some hidden strength and escaped?" Alice nodded. "Preposterous." Verna's voice boomed like thunder. She could no longer stand Alice's absurd words. Her face twisted with fury. "Those lowly goblins who only scurry under our feet, whimpering and wailing all day long. How could they possibly have the strength to escape? Let alone kill 4 of our elven warriors? This is nothing short of a farce." "I'm merely stating the facts." Alice remained completely unfazed by Verna's anger. She stared calmly into Verna's blazing eyes, her voice steady and firm. "Facts?" Verna was utterly enraged by Alice's words. She suddenly took a step forward. The ground trembled violently under her immense power. Cracks spreading across the earth beneath her feet. "Don't think I won't lay a hand on you. Just because you have the blessing of immortality. Then tell me, who else would leave behind weapons, treasure, and supplies, and risk becoming our enemies? Just to kidnap goblins? Verna was lost for words for a moment. She could only clench her fists tightly, wanting to punch Alice. That stuck-up pretty face of hers. Enough. Just then, Vidona, who had been silent all this time, cut off their argument. "Stop bickering. If they're gone, they're gone. We'll just catch more. We haven't suffered any actual losses anyway." Her voice was not loud, but it carried an air of undeniable authority. "Lady Vidona..." Verna turned to look at Vidona. She wanted to say something. "What is it?" Vidona tilted her head slightly and shot Verna a glance. You don't listen to me anymore? The moment her words faded, a terrifying demonic aura descended from above, pressing Verna's massive frame flat against the ground. She struggled to get up, only to find she couldn't move an inch. No, I dare not! Verna forced herself to speak, gritting her teeth and shaking her head, her voice hoarse and trembling. Vidona paid little mind to Verna's reaction. She waved her hand gently, and the demonic aura dissipated without a trace. Then she called out to the other elves, Today, we've captured plenty of goblins. You all may go enjoy yourselves. At Vidona's words, the elves erupted into cheers. They grinned with flushed cheeks and rushed toward where the goblins were held. Verna also struggled to her feet and silently followed behind them. Care to join us? An elf dragged over a goblin with a face full of despair and extended an invitation to Alice. No thanks. Alice looked disgusted. I don't want to get dirty, chi. The elf scoffed disdainfully, pretending to be all high and mighty. The elf's words struck Alice's heart like icy arrows, piercing straight to her core. She didn't say a word, just stared silently at the elves with their lewd grins, and sighed softly. She turned around and headed toward the village entrance. Where are you going? An elf couldn't help but ask. Alice paused, glanced back at her, her eyes filled with unwavering resolve. I will find those goblins and prove that I was right. F watched her departing figure and shook her head gently. She knew Alice's personality well. Once Alice made up her mind, nothing could change it. Besides, Alice bore the blessing of immortality. No one could kill her. Early the next morning, Yi was woken up by the commotion outside. What's going on? He got up from his wooden plank bed and glanced around. The goblins who'd been sleeping here were nowhere to be seen. He opened the door and looked outside, only to find the goblin clansmen had woken up bright and early and started their daily training under Shahai's lead. A bunch of goblins were gritting their teeth on the ground, doing push-ups, looking utterly ridiculous. Truth be told, morning jogs would be more effective, but the forest was far from safe, especially since they were still way too weak. If a few wild boars showed up again, without him around to protect them, Yi doubted they'd make it out unscathed. Clan leader, you're up! Qiu Shui handed Yi a skewer of roasted meat. The meat on it was sizzling with grease. Yo again took a look, and was stunned. Barbecue for breakfast? Really? Qiu Shui looked confused. She sniffed the skewer, figuring her roasting job was just fine. It's nothing. Yi shook his head. He took the roasted meat and took a bite. No salt, and the blood wasn't drained properly. As terrible as always. He glanced at Qiu Shui and saw her happily munching on a fish. For goblins who rarely got to eat meat, this was probably a rare delicacy, but Yi just couldn't stomach it. Looks like I need to get some condiments from the humans. Speaking of that, Yi thought of that ungrateful girl from before. If she hadn't scared him half to death, he wouldn't have forgotten to loot the spoils. Qiu Shui, let's go. Qiu Shui didn't ask any questions. She agreed at once, and followed behind Yi, like a little tail. Seeing their clan leader come down, the training goblins all called out to Yi. Keep up the good work. Yosian nodded. Yes, sir! The goblins shouted in unison. Clan leader, I feel like I'm gonna die. An ill-timed voice rang out right then. Yi looked up. It was that same goblin Mullah. Mullah, don't worry. You won't die. Yi walked over and patted Mullah on the shoulder. As he encouraged him, a faint pink glow emanated from his hand. Right after that, a stream of pink energy flowed into Mullah's body, instantly restoring all the stamina Mullah had burned through. All of it. Whoa, I'm not tired anymore. Feeling his exhaustion vanish, Mullah's face lit up with excitement. He looked at his clan leader with immense gratitude. Our clan leader really does care about us. The more he looked at Ye Yan, the more he admired him. But Ye Yan's next words left him completely frozen. Well, since your stamina's back, I'll reward you with 100 more push-ups. Clan leader! Mullah tried to say something more, but Shahai shot him a glare that shut him up. Anyone else feeling worn out? Let your clan leader help you out. Yan smiled warmly and scanned the sweating goblins. No, we're fine, not tired at all. The goblins all shook their heads frantically, leaving Ye Yan feeling a little disappointed. But he knew he couldn't push them too hard. He'd have to slowly tap into their potential bit by bit. Ye Yan couldn't help but wonder if he was turning into a monster, but this was all for their own good. Yu Yan nodded to himself. He said to Shahai, I'll leave them in your care. I'm going out for a bit. Understood. But where are you off to, clan leader? Shahai looked confused. We've already got more than enough food from hunting. Shahai patted Shaha on the shoulder and grinned. Stockpiling food is super important too, you know. Oh, Shahai half understood. He nodded. If we can't hunt any prey that day, we won't have meat to eat. The thought of going without meat that day suddenly made Shahai realize just how crucial food storage was. He nodded vigorously. Exactly. Seeing that Shahai got it, Ye Yan felt a wave of relief. If I starved to death after transmigrating to another world, I'd be the laughingstock of all transmigrators. That said, food storage was still a tricky problem. For instance, those wild boars we can't finish eating could be air-dried, or turned into cured meat and stuff like that. But he had no clue how to do it. Maybe we should capture someone who knows how. With that thought in mind, Ye Yan left the habitat with Chushui and vanished from sight. They arrived at the spot where they'd saved that woman, Anaya, earlier. Ye Yan's gaze fell on the remains that had been mauled by beasts until only bones were left. Clothing scraps were scattered everywhere, and the ground was stained red with blood. But none of their belongings were anywhere to be seen. Not even the two men's knives were left. It was obvious someone had come and picked them clean. Chushui let out a sound of regret, licking his lips. We should have dragged these bodies back to eat when we left the other day. Now those other monsters got a free meal. Huh? Ye Yan froze in shock. Only then did it hit him. Right now they were goblins, not humans. For them, humans might just be part of the menu too. But Ye Yan, who'd been human in his past life, couldn't wrap his head around that. We can't eat them? Kyosui looked up, his green eyes filled with pure confusion. We can't! Ye Yan shook his head. And it's not just humans. If he had a choice, Yo Yan had no intention of eating any creatures that could talk. It wasn't about being kind. It was just his human instincts acting up. Oh. Kyusui nodded without asking further questions. The chieftain must have his reasons for doing this. Chieftain, wait! Before Chushui could finish what he was about to say, Yo Yan suddenly pulled him back hard. The entire group of goblins quickly stepped back. Whoosh! In the next second, a flash of blade light streaked across. Boom! A huge crater appeared on the ground. A deep, rough, and feral panting sound echoed through the quiet forest. No way. Standing before Ye Yan and the others was a creature, nearly 3 meters tall, covered head to toe in thick black fur. With bulging muscles all over its body, saliva dripped from the corner of its mouth, and 2 sharp fangs jutted out from either side of its jaws. Its eyes were bloodshot, and white puffs of air billowed from its nostrils with every breath. It gripped a giant blade bigger than a door handle, slamming it heavily onto the ground. It was a boar man. Shushui's face turned pale with shock, staring at the huge crater on the ground. If that blow had landed on him just now, he would have been a goner for sure. He swallowed hard. Making up his mind about something, he stepped forward. Chieftain, you run! I can hold him off alone. As he spoke, he charged straight ahead, completely ignoring all the combat training he'd ever received. Get back here, Ye Yan roared. What the hell are you doing, rushing head-on as an assassin? Besides, Ye Yan lifted his head, gazing at the boar man who towered a full head above him. When has a chieftain ever run away? Leaving his clansmen to hold the line? Chieftain! Kyushui exclaimed. There's no way I'm gonna run away. Leaving you to fend for yourself. Cut the crap! Use the protection spell I taught you earlier. Master it now. Follow the method I showed you before. Command your guardian power! Ye Yan let out a roar and charged straight at it. I'll use you to test how much stronger this body has gotten. The boar man let out a furious snarl, lifted its giant blade and hacked at Ye Yan. Ye Yan didn't dodge or evade. Clashing his dagger head-on with the massive blade, a powerful force sent him staggering back several steps. Nice protection spell. That's some serious strength. Ye Yan gritted his teeth and said. Then he changed his attack trajectory. This time, he didn't choose to trade blows head-on. Instead, he circled around to its side and struck a fierce blow right at its neck. Unexpectedly, Ye Yan's sword couldn't even pierce the boar man's fur. Roar! The boar man let out a deafening roar, waving its giant blade wildly and slashing at Ye Yan. Seeing this, Ye Yan didn't hesitate for a second, activated his combat skill, speed boost to dodge the blade, and jumped up, planting both feet on the boar man's shoulders, using the momentum to leap upward abruptly. In the next moment, a streak of blue light glinted on the blade in Ye Yan's hand. Combat skill Piercing Thrust was activated. The instant the thrust was unleashed, Ye Yan's body instinctively moved in sync, driving the sword hard into its back. Squish! The extremely sharp dagger sank into the boarman's back, sending blood splattering everywhere, but it still didn't pierce through. Damn it, Ye Yan cursed under his breath. The injured boarman let out a painful shriek. This puny goblin dared to wound me? The boarman flew into a rage instantly, lifted its giant blade and tried to hack Ye Yan to pieces. But it forgot one crucial thing. Kyushui, who had appeared out of nowhere, slashed a knife right at the boarman's ankle, making it lose its balance. Nice work. Seeing this, Ye Yan didn't waste the opportunity. Gathering power in his hand, the sword blade glowed with dazzling light. Grunt. The boarman tried to struggle to its feet, but it was too late. Combat skill. Heavy strike was fully charged. Die for me! Ye Yan roared loudly, bringing down the sword glowing with blade light. Swish! A streak of sword light cut across the boarman's body. Blood spraying everywhere. A hideous... Head rolled off. Ah! The boarman let out a final scream. Its huge body crashed heavily to the ground. Your lust authority has been activated. Absorb 200 lust energy from the defeated target. Proficiency of your combat skill. Heavy strike increased by 1. Hearing the mechanical voice suddenly, Ye Yan let out a sigh of relief. Yes! Awesome! Looking at the boarman's corpse in front of him, Kyushui shouted excitedly, and pounced toward Ye Yan. Chief, you're so amazing! I never thought we could kill a boarman. Ye Yan pushed him away in disgust, and said modestly, It's nothing. We already killed elves. Why would we be afraid of a boarman? It's not the same. Elves are elves. Boarmen are boarmen. These half-beasts have incredibly tough bodies. And their strength is terrifying, Kyushui explained to Ye Yan. Usually when we encounter boarmen like this, we only have one choice, to run. I never thought we could actually kill one. Half-beasts? Ye Yan looked confused. Is that a race? Kyushui shook his head. Not sure either. Tilting his little head clearly, he explained, Half-beasts is a general term for those monsters that are a mix of beasts and humans. 1,000 years ago, a beast king unified all these races. Ever since then, they've all been classified as half-beasts. Like lizardmen, boarmen, birdmen. Oh, Ye Yan nodded, half understanding. I wonder if there are cat girls or fox spirits among them. Let's dissect it first. Kyusui nodded, stepping forward consciously and pulling out his dagger. To start dissecting the boarman, Ye Yan went over to help. The boarman's too big. We just need to cut off some skin and meat to take back. As for the bones and stuff, they'll just be dead weight to carry. And as for making soup, we don't even have a pot right now. Like, we can make soup anyway. Ye Yan couldn't help licking his lips. Looks like a trip to the human settlement is a must. We need to get our hands on some pots, bowls, ladles, and seasonings. This is urgent. Besides, from what Kyushui and Shahai told me, goblins and humans don't seem to be hostile to each other. That girl we saw yesterday didn't look the least bit scared of us either. Got it, Chief. I'll go alone. It's fine, let's go together. In no time, Ye Yan was slicing the boarman's meat with his dagger. Suddenly he paused. All done. Chief Kyushui wrapped the meat in animal hide and looked at Ye Yan, who'd frozen in place, asking in confusion, What's wrong? Chief? Ye Yan shook his head and turned to Kyushui. Kyushui, you take this food back first. Chief, I'll go back with you. The smile faded from Kyushui's face, replaced by a tinge of disappointment. It's still early. I'm gonna see if I can hunt some more prey. Ye Yan tried his best to stay calm and grinned. I'll check if there's any other game around. Okay, Kyusui nodded, dragging the meat away with a dejected look, glancing back every few steps. Off you go then, okay. Watching Kyushui's retreating figure, Ye Yan's expression turned somber in an instant. That mechanical voice kept echoing in his head. Elf Alice is looking at you in confusion. Lust energy +1. Elf Alice wants to eat you. Lust energy +1. Elf Alice tells herself she shouldn't do it. Lust energy +1. Ugh, this elf is way too much. Without a moment's hesitation, Ye Yan turned and bolted. Combat skill, speed boost. It activated in the blink of an eye. The second Ye Yan fled the scene, a graceful figure landed right where he'd just been standing. He got away. Alice frowned, her gaze darting back and forth between Ye Yan's tracks and Kyushui's figure. She wasn't entirely sure if these two goblins were among the ones that had escaped earlier. After all, she'd never made a move against those goblins to begin with. Furthermore, among elves, goblins were considered to have owners, Only elves who'd been invited were allowed to feast on goblins that didn't belong to them. Alice's personality was crystal clear. No elf would ever invite her. And even if someone did, she'd turn them down flat. This was why she only knew the approximate number of escaped goblins, but had no clue what they looked like, from the way that goblin hauling the meat kept calling him chief. It was obvious that Ye Yan was definitely an important figure among the goblins. But most importantly of all, Yezoyan had an inexplicable allure to her, one that stirred up a long-suppressed desire in her. At the thought of this, Alice didn't hesitate for a second, and chased after Ye Yan. The forest seemed to whisper to her, letting her lock onto Ye Yan's location in no time. To Alice's surprise, that goblin was moving pretty fast, way faster than any other goblin she'd seen. But that was as fast as he could go. Magic coiled around her body, boosting Alice's speed drastically, narrowing the gap with Ye Yan in an instant. She quickly caught up to the goblin ahead. Yet just as she was within an arm's reach, Ye Yan's speed suddenly picked up a notch, the distance between them slowly closing again. What in the world? A look of confusion crossed Alice's stunning face. She bit her red lip lightly. I was going to catch you without a scratch. You left me no choice. Your vassal level has increased by 1. Your stats have received a minor boost. The mechanical voice echoed in Ye Yan's mind, making him let out an involuntary sigh of relief. Thank goodness for his loyal clansman, sending him power just in the nick of time. Otherwise, he would have been caught by that ill-intentioned elf ages ago. Watching the distance between him and Alice grow wider and wider, Ye Yan was just starting to relax. Elf Alice wants to torture you mercilessly with magic. Lust energy +1. Ah! Before Ye Yan could even react, he glanced over his shoulder and saw a massive magic circle behind him. Blazing flames erupted from the circle, the air around them sizzling with heat. Watching the enormous fireball hurtling toward him, Ye Yan tried to dodge, but something tripped him up. He looked down to see vines sprouting from the ground. He swung his sword and cut through the vines, but it was already too late. The huge fireball was upon him. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out. Strangely enough, the searing flames within the massive fireball faded away in an instant. As the smoke cleared, Alice looked over, only to see a charred patch of ground. No sign of Ye Yan's body anywhere. What? Alice frowned in disbelief. Fireballs shouldn't be able to incinerate a creature completely, let alone turn it to ash without a trace. But she scanned her surroundings, and there was still no sign of Ye Yan. He wasn't even hiding among the plants. Impossible, she couldn't have lost track of him. Just as Alice was thinking that, swish! A flash of sword light came slicing down from above, and blood splattered everywhere. Thud! Alice's head rolled onto the ground. Phew! Ye Yan glanced at Alice's head and chuckled. That was way harder than it should have been. Thank goodness for that invisible protection. Really wasn't easy at all. Then he saw the head rolling on the ground. Smile at him. Found you. It was Alice. The head rolling on the ground suddenly came to a halt and curled into an eerie grin. I won't let you slip away from me this time. Ian stared at the head in front of him and tightened his grip on the blade in his hand, calm as ever. It suddenly clicked. Oh right, how could he have forgotten? When he'd struck down that elf just now, he hadn't heard that familiar system notification sound at all, which meant, Cat got your tongue? Scared now? Alice let out a soft hum, sounding quite smug. If you come back with me quietly right now and answer all my questions, I might just consider letting you off the hook. As soon as she finished speaking, inside Ye Yan's head, that mysterious mechanical voice rang out again. Elf Alice. Wants to eat you right now. Lust energy +2. Fairy Alice is gonna whip you. Watching your helpless weeping face, lust stat increases by 3. You're not dead. Ye Yan stared at Alice, who was rolling on the ground, shooting him a pure, innocent smile. He just couldn't wrap his head around it. How could such a perverted thought lurk inside this lewd fairy's mind?
No.
He never should have expected anything normal from the fairies of this world. Him. Alice blinked her eyes. Saliva dripped from her lips involuntarily. She looked at Ye Yan and said, Want to know something? Whoosh! Before Alice could finish her sentence, a flash of sword light cut through the air. Ye Yan didn't hesitate for a second. He stabbed straight at Alice's head. Splurt. That beautiful head split clean in two in an instant, yet the mechanical notification sound didn't ring out. The fairy in front of him wasn't dead. You bastard. Alice was absolutely furious. How dare this guy try to finish her off even in this situation? Aren't you even curious why I didn't die? Not even a little. Ye Yan raised his sword quickly. Another flash of sword light streaked by, chopping the already split head into 4 pieces. But he didn't stop there. Alice's body lying on the ground. Ye Yan didn't spare it either. He hacked it into several pieces as well. But it was no use. You asshole! Alice's reformed head glared daggers at Ye Yan. Whoosh! What greeted her was Ye Yan's even fiercer attacks. Once, twice, 10 times, every single strike. Split that head apart without fail, and her body lying on the ground too. But it was still no use. No matter how finely he chopped her up, she could always reform herself. You damned bastard, Alice snarled. But Ye Yan paid her no mind at all, hacking away like a madman. I refuse to believe it. That your power is infinite. Ye Yan roared through gritted teeth. I refuse to believe I can't kill you, no matter how many times it takes. No matter how sore his hands get. No matter how close he is to draining all his stamina. He didn't stop for a second. Because he had no other choice. He'd already used his silent blessing. If he let this fairy recover now, the only thing waiting for him was death. He was as good as dead. You bastard. Goblin! Alice flew into a rage. She wasn't going to waste any more time on this brainless goblin. Boom. Terrifying magic erupted from Alice's body, the magic surging out of her, spread outward with her as the center, forming a shockwave, sending Ye Yan flying. Bang! That sudden attack caught Ye Yan completely off guard, sending him flying like a kite with its string snapped, tumbling backward. Ah! He crashed to the ground, gritting his teeth in agony. Sure, his physique was way tougher than an ordinary goblin's, but he was still flesh and blood at the end of the day. He couldn't take this kind of beating. Crap, thinking about Alice. Ye Yan forced himself through the pain and scrambled back to his feet, ready to swing his sword and hack at her again. But to his shock, Alice's body had already fully regenerated, arms crossed over her chest, staring at him with a cold, emotionless look, 3 shimmering ice shields swirling around her slender, gorgeous figure. How are you still alive? Ye Yan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, trying to stall for time to recover his strength and heal his wounds, looking for a chance to make a run for it. Ha! Hearing Ye Yan's question, Alice scoffed in annoyance. What? You didn't want to hear it earlier, did you? Now that you've got nowhere to run, you're curious? Yulgan had nothing to say. Was he supposed to tell her that he didn't bother talking to the soon-to-be dead? But now that you're not dead anymore, he figured he might as well ask what's going on. Did you really think you're the only one with a blessing? Glancing at the badly injured Ye Yan, Alice smiled leisurely in no hurry at all. If I had to guess, yours is the blessing of concealing aura, isn't it? If you'd used it to escape, I really wouldn't have been able to stop you. But Alice shot Ye Yan a glance, her eyes filled with disdain. You actually tried to kill me outright. You've got some guts, I'll give you that. Hearing Alice's words, Ye Yan could only say, I never thought you'd be unkillable. Besides, if it weren't for that weird blessing of yours, you would have been dead by my blade earlier. As for escaping, his blessing was temporary and time-limited. Whether he could even make it out of this forest alive, evading the fairies, was anyone's guess. Besides, if he ran away and let her go back to the fairy village to tell the others, things would only get worse. Then he wouldn't just be facing one fairy anymore. That's why Ye Yan took the risk and tried to kill her right then and there. What he didn't expect was that the fairy in front of him might be even harder to deal with than a whole group of them. Immortality, plus that magic that knocked him flying earlier, that kind of overwhelming power, coupled with her magic, she's basically an indestructible mobile turret. So you faked being vulnerable earlier, just to lure me out? Yu Yan suddenly realized why he'd been able to get the drop on the fairy earlier. Exactly, Alice nodded, her jade-like fingers brushing the silver strands from her forehead, a confident smile spreading across her face. Aren't you afraid I'll really kill you now? Kill me? Hearing Ye Yan's words, Alice laughed. To tell you the truth, I'm immortal. Ever since I obtained this blessing of immortality, other than Her Royal Highness the Princess, I've never feared anyone. Immortal my ass. Ye Yan refused to believe such a thing as true immortality existed. Even if it did, there had to be a way to break it. It's just something beyond his current level to handle. But Ye Yan had no intention of getting captured just like that. He wasn't about to let that happen. His strength and wounds had already fully recovered thanks to the Lust Authority. Whoosh! Ye Yan didn't hesitate. Gathering strength in his legs, he plunged his hand into the sand, and yanked hard. A thick vine was pulled out of the dirt. What? Alice's eyes widened in shock. When did you? Was it during the smoke from the explosion? Or when her head was split into 4 pieces, and she lost her vision? Either way, it was clear that this goblin was far from ordinary. She tried to dodge, but it was already too late. The vine shot upward, snagging Alice's ankle perfectly. Then Ye Yan pulled hard. Ah! Alice lost her balance in an instant. Perfect chance, seizing the moment. Ye Yan didn't hesitate, launching himself forward like a coiled spring. His speed was blistering, making Alice scream in disbelief. You've been going at it for so long with that blessing. Where the hell are you getting the stamina from? She'd calculated it perfectly. His stamina should have been at its limit. On top of that, the magic shockwave she'd unleashed earlier should have left him badly injured. But right now, Ye Yan didn't look injured in the slightest. This goblin has more than one blessing, but you won't get away that easily. Alice's eyes narrowed as she lay on the ground. Not that easy. With that, Alice clapped her hands together, channeling her magic into the ground. A brilliant glow suddenly erupted from the earth. In the next moment, rumble. The ground shook violently. What? Ye Yan's eyes widened as he spun around, and saw beneath Alice's feet an intricate glowing magic circle, slowly beginning to activate